And honestly, I didn't know.
Sorry, Michelle, I just realized our sound was not on.
Okay,
Your sound is on.
and now.
Okay, and Michelle, if you, just for the record, if you want to introduce yourself again, I think you can go on then.
Okay, all right. So for the record, my name is Michelle Boslin, representative from Wyndham 3. I'll be going through a variety of different topics in the next 15 minutes. And I wanted to tell you a little bit to start out about sort of how I became passionate about mushrooms and realized how many people in the world are also passionate about mushrooms, particularly Vermonters. So during the pandemic a few years back in 2020, while all of us were sitting on Zoom and spending a lot of time in our house legislating and working and doing lots of things, but not being with other people, I had the opportunity to go outside and go for lots of walks, as many of us did. And I'm lucky to live next door to a nature reserve called Bald Hill. And what I found is during the pandemic, I would go out once a day, twice a day, sometimes even 3 times a day into the woods. And the most significant thing that I would notice when I was in the woods was the abundance of mushrooms. There were so many different mushrooms, so many different colors, different shapes, some on trees, some from the ground. And I was fascinated by these. I'd lived in that location for almost 10 years at that point, but it never occurred to me to take a picture of a mushroom. And yet, when we were trapped in our Zoom world, I started to do that. I wanted to capture these moments. And I ended up sharing them on social media and realizing that people all over the world kind of care about mushrooms in a way that I never knew was possible. I posted one picture of a mushroom that I had taken, and I got 500 responses, including from people in Ukraine and Taiwan and Australia. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. Mushrooms can really bring us together in this time of isolation. And that's one of the things that I found as I continued to become interested in mushrooms and mushrooms in Vermont, is that mushrooms really do bring people together. And here in Vermont, I found there are 2 segments of people who are interested in mushrooms. One of them tend to be sort of the vegetarian back to the landers, and the other side tends to have sometimes a different political perspective, and they might be more of the hunting and trapping and spending time in the woods for those reasons. But those same populations both can agree and love mushrooms. And I've had some amazing conversations with people on both sides of the aisle about mushrooms and foraging that bring a common ground that that I haven't experienced with other topics. So mushrooms are not political, but they're something we can agree on, and I appreciate that. One of the things I realized as a person who became a photographer of mushrooms and a forager of mushrooms is that in the off season, which would be between November and April when the weather is too cold for mushrooms to grow in the wild, I wanted to work on cultivating. I wanted to grow mushrooms on my own. And so you can see in the photo right here with the large mushroom block, I was growing. I bought a kit from what's called Slipstream Farm, which is one of 6 mushroom small businesses in Vermont that I'm aware of, and that one happens to be in Wyndham County. So this season I grew lion's mane, which are also in the Hericium family. I grew coral tooth, which is another one in the Hericium family. The one on the bottom is oyster mushrooms, which a constituent actually sent me this. She was so excited to hear I was advocating for mushrooms. She said, look, I'm doing mushrooms too. And so anyway, there are a lot of people that really have enjoyed embracing mushrooms, both in the wild and in the agricultural sense on a small scale in Vermont. So I'm going to give you some facts about mushrooms. There are over 10,000 mushrooms that you can find in North America. Not all of those are in Vermont, but many of them are. The kingdom fungi is made up of 3.5 million species, which includes many varieties as well as mushrooms. We're going to focus on mushrooms today. Fungi are neither plants nor animals. They don't have chlorophyll, but some of them are amazingly animal-like. Some fungi can be carnivorous. Some fungi can merge with caterpillars so that they really are almost an animal species. I don't have time to go into it, but if you're curious, Google zombie ants and Tibetan mushroom worms. Pretty interesting stuff. In terms of ecology, you've got a bunch of experts coming in tomorrow, but I would just like to name that 90% of land plant species are associated with fungi that help plants and trees to access nutrients. There's a symbiotic relationship between fungi and trees and plants that helps plants and trees to access important nutrients. They keep our soils healthy. They help decompose the forests. And in terms of our mushrooms that you are able to consume, which is a small fraction of them, they are responsible for a lot of the economic success of mushrooms. So there's a projected to be an increasing vegan population in the world, and vegans can use mushrooms as a food source and a protein source. Mushrooms are often considered to be a superfood because they have high nutritional contents, including even B12, which is usually only found in animal products. And there are many mushrooms that have medicinal qualities as well, including the one the students chose. So my favorite part of this project is the fact that the students were key in selecting the mushroom to move forward. So I was a teacher before I was a legislator, and I worked with lots of different students, and I've come to many classrooms since I've been a legislator to help students understand the legislative process. And what I did with these two school groups is I made multiple visits to both the Compass Middle School and the Windham Elementary School and introduced the idea of how the legislative process works, what are our existing state symbols, what might a mushroom look like as a state symbol. And then we went deeply into what are the types of mushrooms, what might we want, what might we not want. And then the students got to debate, and we practiced both a voice vote and then later a division. And in the end, they came up with almost unanimous agreement. And I'll let the students tell you a little bit more about what they were looking for when they come in, because they had very strong opinions. But it was really satisfying for me as an educator to see how excited some of the kids became about this. And they are scheduled to come in and speak to you on March 12th. So you'll get to hear from some of these folks directly. So you might not think of mushrooms as a huge economic product. Like you think about Vermont and you probably think about maple syrup and blueberries and apples. But mushrooms are actually a huge economic resource for any place that accesses them, which includes us. So the global mushroom market in 2022 was close to $55 billion. It's expected to rise at an annual rate of close to 10%, going up to 2030, at which point the global market is expected to be $116 billion. In the US, the level is still quite high, over $4 billion in 2022, growing to $9.2 billion in 2030. And in Vermont, the estimated market size in 2022 was $7.8 million, growing to nearly 18 million in 2030. And I should say that looking at the market data I was able to access, and thank you to our treasurer, Mike Pichek, who helped me find this information, these numbers are actually not all inclusive. These include mushrooms that are grown and sold. These do not include educational mushroom experiences. So for example, if you hire a private mushroom guide to take you on a walk in the forest or on your land, that's not reflected here. And you will have some people coming in to testify who will speak. You absolutely can do that. In fact, one of the people coming tomorrow is a certified mushroom guide. So yeah, anyway, but those numbers are not reflected.
Representative Full.
Do you know which country has the largest mushroom markets?
You know what? I do not. If I had to guess, I would say China, but I actually don't know that definitively.
Representative O'Brien.
So just quickly, in Vermont's market, is there a breakout between what was cultivated and just foraged?
It is not. The numbers that were shared with me came from the state treasurer's office, and they appear to be more about sales. And in terms of sales, some people cultivate and sell them on their own. Some foragers actually collect and sell them on their own. And there are states where you have to be certified to do that. And one of our guides, or one of our people that's coming in to talk here, is a certified mushroom wild identification expert. But Vermont actually doesn't recognize those. In Vermont, anyone can forage and sell, which I honestly think is not a good thing. But we do allow that. And hopefully people that are buying mushrooms to sell in small markets are doing so wisely. But I don't know what the breakdown is. The final fact on the economic sheet is just that the American Mushroom Institute estimates that every pound of mushrooms has $3.30 of economic impact in the United States. And the industry supports over 21,000 jobs here in the US. So very lightly, I just want to touch on the fact that mushrooms actually draw tourists to Vermont. You might think about leaf peepers that come for the leaves. People also come for mushrooms. This is a sampling of 16 sessions that were offered at Vermont State Parks this last summer. And people absolutely come from within Vermont, around Vermont, to see these mushroom guided tours, and also from outside in order to do things both at our state parks and with private guides as well. So there really are people who are passionate about this and want to come to Vermont and really care about mushrooms. So since I introduced this bill, I've been contacted by all kinds of people who are very excited about estate mushroom. I've been contacted by parents, by students, by foragers, by naturalists, by mushroom guides, a member of the Vermont Fungi Scientific Committee, which I didn't even know existed, but it's there. The author of Mason Goes Mushrooming is a children's book author, and she's actually attended sessions at over 20 states in the US related to mushrooms. And most recently, she actually was in California where they adopted a state mushroom this year. And she said there was just an amazing amount of celebration and attention that came to the states when they selected a Vermont state, a state mushroom. And she's a Vermonter, and so she's actually especially excited for us to adopt that as well. I've talked to and been encouraged by people from the Department of Agriculture. Yesterday, I was contacted by the Director of Forestry, and I've had lots and lots of conversation with legislators who have talked to me both about how they've shared this bill as an example when they visit schools and talk to students about, hey, kids can have a voice. Kids are going to testify in the State House. To other people who told me, I had long COVID, and part of the way I got better was going slowly for walks in the woods, and it motivated me to get up and get moving again in the world when I knew that I'd be seeing these beautiful pieces of nature. So there's a lot of different perspectives, but a lot of enthusiasm about estate mushroom. A couple of few final facts. Mushrooms play an important role in our world, ecologically, nutritionally, medicinally, and economically. Mushrooms are a vital part of Vermont's natural and agricultural worlds, and the mushroom that the students selected is actually one that can both be cultivated and found in the woods as a foraging product. Mushrooms get people out into nature, and they draw people to Vermont in a variety of ways. So those are the things that I wanted to share with you, but I am totally happy to answer any questions that you might have. And I will point out to you, although I'm not going to spend time talking about the slides, I have some additional resources listed. 2 slides after, which you might want to look at later, include some interviews with Compass students and an article that was printed about the Wyndham and the Compass student involvement in this project. So if anybody has questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Representative Bosman, thank you. Before we take questions,
Okay.
a very thorough presentation, very, very helpful. Representative Graham, you're first.
So the mushroom that you're advocating to become the state mushroom is
Yeah.
native in Vermont?
I mean, I don't know how to, I mean, it grows naturally here in our woods, so I would assume so. I don't think that anybody intentionally brought it here. I think it's been here for generations as far as I'm aware.
Never seen one of those.
Yeah, you can talk to the folks that are coming tomorrow. It's pretty prominent in the right season. If you're in the woods, you can find them. I found them twice, once on my property and once in the woods.
Representative Levitt?
I just have a quick question. How many kids were involved in this decision?
You know what? I'd have to add up the numbers. It was all of the students in the middle school of Compass and all of the students in the elementary school. I believe they're both very small groups. I mean, they're very small schools. I believe that at Wyndham Elementary, there were 14 or 15 students. And at Compass, I believe it was 19 or 20.
Okay.
So small groups, but every student participated. Yeah, and I would say actually in terms of Representative Graham's question, when I spoke with the Secretary of Agriculture, his office told me they had been thinking of putting forward their own Vermont State Mushroom Bill. And they had a short list of mushrooms that they liked. And Bear's Head Tooth was one that they liked for some of the same reasons the students did, because you could naturally find it in our woods. And it was also an agricultural product. It was on their short list as well.
Representative Tuffle?
Yeah, kind of on that native question. So this has been an ongoing question in my mind forever. Like, so are there introduced species of mushrooms? Does it work the same way as plant life, given that they reproduce through spores, perhaps mushrooms don't have any one place they call home. What's your take on that?
That might be a better question for the specialist tomorrow, but I can
Okay.
just lightly say that mushrooms grow primarily from under the ground, but they also can grow by spores above the ground. So there certainly is a natural way that mushrooms can spread themselves. So that can happen both under the ground and above the ground and would naturally occur based on wind and soil conditions. That said, some mushrooms you can plant intentionally. You can take the spores and transplant them and grow them, and they succeed and thrive. Other ones you cannot transplant and use. You cannot, basically, you can domesticate some mushrooms. You cannot domesticate others. So that's why when I said that this particular mushroom, bear's head tooth, can be cultivated or it can be found in the wild, it's really unusual for that because it's hard to intentionally plant mushrooms.
Okay,
Most of the mushrooms only grow if they decide the conditions are right for them. And there's a small number that we are able to capture the spores and transplant and that are amenable to our climate.
very good.
So for the most part, mushrooms spread on their own, but you can transplant some if it's a friendly climate.
So maybe the term naturalized is
Could be.
applicable.
Yeah, but look, this mushroom is called Hericium americanum, and that's called the hedgehog of the Americas.
Hmm.
So Hericium is hedgehog, which means it has long tooth-like strands. So like a hedgehog has spikes, it has long strands. And Americanum is like, this is the version that grows in the Americas. So lion's mane is really prominent in China. And some people grow lion's mane here, but lion's mane wasn't originally from here. So I think actually this is the version that more likely evolved here over time.
Very good.
The Latin name is something Americana. Is that?
Hericium americanum. Yep. And Hericium means hedgehog and Americanum means of the Americas, which is actually one of the things, some of the elementary students were super excited about that. They said, a Vermont state symbol and it says America, it's perfect. Yeah. Some of the second graders were very excited about
Very
that.
patriotic.
Yes,
Representative Lipsky.
yes.
Yeah, thank you. What a riveting testimony.
Thank you.
And I was struck, as I used to run a conservation school in Windham County a long time ago, but in forest ecology and soil ecology, we do a lot of studies on the impact of microorganisms for developing productive, healthy forest soil. But I was curious about the role of these fungi in the carbon cycle, particularly the carbon cycle in the soil surface.
Yeah, I suggest you ask that question to the specialist tomorrow, but fungi actually do contribute to carbon sequestration, but I'm not a scientist and I can't explain that very well. So I would say, ask the specialist tomorrow and they would be happy to address that for you.
Thank you.
Representative O'Brien.
It's a simple question. What makes something a mushroom but not a fungi? So chaga or truffles, maybe not mushrooms?
So all mushrooms are fungi,
Right.
not all fungi are mushrooms. So the mushroom, here, let me go back. There's actually one slide that might help you with this one. Oh, wait, here we go. So the mushroom is what they call the fruiting body of the mycelium. The mycelium are like the roots that come beneath. The mushroom is the fruiting body that comes above. So something that has a fruiting body would be a mushroom. Something like a yeast, there's no fruiting body. You have these tiny little granules that might bubble if you add sugar and water or whatever, but you don't get a fruiting body. So a mushroom would be anything with a fruiting body. It can grow on a tree. It can come from the soil. It can come from leaf litter. But lots and lots of the yeast, of the fungi, like molds, yeast, lichens, would not be mushrooms because they don't actually have a fruiting body. And again, the scientists can tell you more, but that's the general idea. Mushrooms are actually a small fraction of the world of fungi.
Any other questions? Can you just show us the picture of the mushroom that we're most interested in?
Yeah, so there are a couple of shots of it. This is one of them. And there's also one on the top page. This one in the corner. So the students have talked about it as, depending on the picture or depending on the mushroom, they talk about it as looking like icicles or waterfalls. Sometimes they say it looks like fireworks or pom-poms, but it's very distinctive looking and sort of celebratory. You know, the students were really like, oh, it's like fireworks, it's like America, you know, it's water, it's like nature, it's from what? So this was by far, the little students and the older students all were in agreement. This is the one that we want. They talked about some of the states have symbols. In fact, even Vermont has some symbols that we share with many other states. And they said, we don't want one that other states have, you know, so some states have already picked mushrooms that also grow in Vermont. And they're like, we don't want that. We want our own. We want it special. We want it unique. And so this was the one that they decided was the right one for us.
Is there a history of the Abenakis using it for any reason?
You know what? That's a good question, and I don't know the answer to that. I would guess yes, but I actually don't know the answer to that.
All right, well, you have set a new high bar for bill introductions here, I think.
Yeah, that was.
You're an lobbyist.
In case you weren't clear, I'm a little bit passionate about this topic. Both kids and mushrooms are things that are close to my heart.
Great, we're supposed to have the LaChapelle in next. Tim, I don't know if he's.
Okay, I would like to wait. If he comes, I would be curious to hear his walkthrough.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tim's on Zoom. Okay, great.
Yes, good morning, everybody.
Hi, good morning, Tim.
Well, thank you very much for having me. For the record, my name is Tim Devlin, Legislative Counsel. I am prepared to walk through the bill if the chair would like, or
There we go.
speak to any of the legal aspects involved with this.
Thank you, Tim. Why don't, if you're able to share your screen, I know it's not a long bill, but why don't we have you put the bill up and
Sure.
then just walk through to start with.
Absolutely.
That's not on these things. It's
It should be also, on, yeah.
And please let me know if you're able to see that.
Yeah, we see it. If you're able to make it a little bit bigger,
Yes.
but it's, yeah, that's great.
Okay.
So, one question before we get started, John.
Jim, just a general question. Going forward, do all Vermont state whatevers have to be recognized and passed by the legislature? Or could the governor just say, the American hedgehog is our new mushroom?
Oh, as far as like official insignia and
Right.
the whatever official of the state. I suppose the governor could, by executive order, declare something. But if it were to be put into statute, that has to go through the regular statutory process, like anything else. And that's what this is proposing to do. And I'm trying to think of it really, if the governor were to do that by executive order, it really wouldn't have much legal effect. But then again, this isn't really something that is intended to have legal effect.
Are all our state designated things in a title somewhere altogether?
Yes, you can find all of the, let's see, flag, insignia, seal is chapter 11 of Title 1. And here we have the coat of arms, the state seal, state flag, Green Mountain Boys flag, state tree, flower, animal, fish, insect, beverage, soil, gem, et cetera, et cetera.
Representative Cole.
My question was pretty similar, so I guess it aligns with history and how we've done this before, but I was just curious about presenting these kinds of things in the form of a resolution versus legal statute and but it sounds like that has never been done before, and maybe because it's not as permanent as law. So maybe that's theory.
This could be put into a resolution, absolutely. And it would be preserved in the record. It would be probably a little bit more difficult to find, but I believe there are somewhat similar resolutions passed pretty regularly as far as, you know, the 5th of May is, you know, XYZ day, you know, commemorating the, you know, whatever group kind of day. Putting it in statute, I think, makes it more easily found by members of the public. and kind of gives it that gravitas of being kind of written in stone to a certain degree. But like other kind of state animals, birds, and insignia, just because it's in statute doesn't really mean it's more than just kind of memorialized in a more permanent way that's bound with the other laws. It kind of gives it a kind of special flair without really any additional legal significance, though.
Okay, Tim, why don't you go ahead and just walk through the bill then?
Okay. So before you, you have H664. And let's see, we'll just skip down to this bill proposes to designate, let's see, sorry, I lost my place here. Hericium americanum, commonly known as the bear head's tooth mushroom, as a state mushroom. And this is an act relating to designating a state mushroom. First, we have a findings section, section 1. I'll just kind of read verbatim because it's relatively short. The General Assembly finds that 1, Vermont does not yet have a state mushroom despite having a state vegetable, a state bird, a state tree, or other state symbols. 2, learning about, identifying, and foraging any mushrooms is a hobby that thousands of young and old Vermonters enjoy and allows Vermonters to spend time in the state's natural environment. 3, designating a state mushroom recognizes the unique and delightful treasures that exist in our state woods. 4, the bear's head tooth mushroom has been voted on and recommended by 2 Southern Vermont schools because it is unique but easy to identify mushroom with nutritional and medicinal qualities. And then going on to section 2, this is what would be codified in statute. And this would add a new section to Title 1, being 1 VSA section 520, to be titled State Mushroom. And this is just at the end of that long list of other state trees, animals, birds, things like that. And we'll read, the state mushroom shall be Hericium americanum, commonly known as the bear's head tooth mushroom, bringing us to section 3, effective date. This act shall take effect on passage.
Thank you, Tim. I'm just going to mention while I'm thinking of it that somebody has reached out already to note that the Latin words here, I guess by protocol, the second word Americanum should not be capitalized. And furthermore, the 2 words together should be italicized. I don't know whether that's consistent or inconsistent with the way statute may have its own rules, but I wanted to share that anyway.
Thank you. I'll look into that, whether it would conform with our drafting conventions or
Great.
how we
Drafting
capture statutes. Yeah.
That's what I was looking for. Let's see, other questions about the bill or anything, Tim, that you then think would be helpful for us as far as the legal implications, et cetera?
Sure. I can say that declaring a state mushroom, like any other kind of insignia of the state, has pretty benign legal effect. It just is a declaration that's recorded in our titles along with all of our other laws. Nothing is really tied to this. So by designating it at all or modifying in the future, as of right now, we'll have no ripple effects legally. I would point out that the findings section is really reflective of the intent and opinion of the General Assembly if this is adopted as such. It's not really our purview in our office to kind of fact check any of this, but that's just what we kind of our general warning to folks is not implying that this is inaccurate or not, but it's not really legal per se, so we don't really get into this part. We just record what the sponsor and then any committee is working on it would like.
Representative O'Brien.
Michelle, is common with mushrooms, is there a false bear's head tooth mushroom that?
There is not, and that was actually one of the things the student liked about this mushroom is there were no toxic lookalikes. So like there's a chanterelle that's bright orange and beautiful, but sometimes it can be mistaken for a jack-o'-lantern, which is toxic. And they were like, no way, no way. They wanted something that was safe. They had a very long checklist and there were no toxic lookalikes. The only one that you might mistake a Hericium americanum for would be one of the, like the coral tooth, which is a related mushroom, which is also edible.
More kids.
Representative Lipsky.
Yeah, Michelle, this is not, or Counselor, this is not necessarily a legal question, but more of a sustainability or unintended consequence idea. If in it, obviously there's a big community of foragers and a lot of excitement. How vulnerable, like the gold being discovered in the Black Hills was catastrophic for Native Americans and other things. What if are mushrooms vulnerable to being over harvested? Like when I was younger and we picked ginseng, that became an ecological challenge.
I mean, again, probably better to ask that tomorrow, but I would say from my experience, there are already lots of foragers in the woods and foragers are pretty respectful about taking mushrooms in a careful way. I mean, the mycelium come from underneath.
Right.
And so it's kind of hard to take everything so that it's not going to come back. I think we don't have to worry about that. I mean, it would be possible somebody went on a foraging trip and they took everything and nobody else got to see them on a given day. But in general, my experience is foragers are respectful and don't take excessively and keep in mind what others are there. Like I found at times a whole log with chicken of the woods, which are very large shelf mushrooms. And you might see like maybe 60 or 70% were taken, but there's still some that are left. And then other people can take some of them. And so I would guess that that's not going to be a problem, but it's a good question because we certainly don't want to cause problems for the mushrooms in Vermont forests.
But what are the names of the ones on the logs?
Shelf.
The one that I just mentioned was called a shelf mushroom, or ones that come out that are flat.
Thank you.
So chicken of the woods is the name that I was referring to, but the mushroom we picked was also a tree mushroom.
Tim, did you in your research look into what other states have a state mushroom? And I think maybe Michelle, you mentioned 5, but yeah.
I mean, I don't know, Tim, do you know the answer? Because otherwise I can speak to it.
No, I do not know the answer.
Okay. There are 5 states that have state mushrooms. California is the most recent. They just got theirs on January 1st. We would be the 6th. And there are 4 other states that are pending. So Texas got theirs a few years ago. They have one called the star mushroom. And it's actually like an endangered species mushroom. It's really hard to find. But when the spores are released, it makes a hissing sound. So they call it the hissing star mushroom, which honestly, that's pretty cool. It's endangered. And when I told the students about that, they're like, no, we don't want that. We want one that we have a chance to find if we go out. So we're like, okay. But yeah, 5 states have them, 5 are pending. We are, with ours drafted as it is here to take effect upon passage, we could potentially be the next one in line, which would be 6th.
Representative O'Brien.
So by default, from what you just told us, this is also going to be our state fungi.
Presumably, unless people wanted another category, but the truth is like mold or lichens or yeast, like, I mean, they're not quite as, they don't have the same wow factor. My guess is that this will be representing the fungi category, but that's up for you folks to decide.
Okay. Tim, I think I don't see any other questions about the bill. It is pretty straightforward. As you note, and most of the text is the findings, and we can talk about those amongst ourselves at some point. We do have testimony tomorrow morning, as you mentioned, Representative Boslin. There'll be experts coming in, a mycologist, somebody from the Agency of Agriculture. I think somebody from ANR also asked to testify. So we will have, I think, a wide range of people to choose from when we have all these good questions that came up earlier that you want to defer appropriately to experts. We will try and get answered tomorrow. And then following the town meeting break, we have a block of time set aside in the afternoon for some of the students who part of this process to come in and explain in a little more detail, I think, what they did, and hopefully answer a few questions if we have any. Okay. Good. Thank you very much, both of you.
Yeah, thanks.
Take care.
Thank you.
We stretch now.
Yes, we can stretch.